Just got to be sharp and ready. Just like we're live right now, Ironhawk Financial, Joseph Lombardi. He's the managing partner over there at 203-815-3673. Give him a call today, and he'll set you up for your financial wealth. I guess he'll get you all set up. He'll show you exactly how you can use some of those insurance type programs that you can use that advance yourself. You're also, if you have a small business, Ironhawk Financial can help you solve some of those problems and capture some of that money before, well, the federal government takes it away. Tonight, we're going to be having a very cool guest right here on the Kevin Allen Show. And Scott Knight, bottom bunk, right here tonight on the Kevin Allen Show. And here we are with my brother, Scott Knight, that I just met. Welcome to the Kevin Allen Show here. And Kevin Allen, that's me. You're Scott Knight. Bottom bunk, a.k.a. But there's a lot more to your story, and it's going to be a long one. So, folks, if you're out there and you're watching this, go get your popcorn. And this might be a multi-part series because it's going to blow your mind. Scott, you're not the typical, right? And let's say it like it is, because there's statistical odds that kind of define, and you and I had some real good conversation. You're a young man growing up in Columbia, South Carolina. Get that story going for me so I can understand.
Well, first and foremost, let me say thank you for having me on your show. It is an honor and indeed a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm humbled by your request. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Scott Knight, more commonly known as the guy from the bottom bunk. I am here in Columbia, South Carolina, getting ready to celebrate our alma mater, University of South Carolina homecoming this weekend. I got to put that out there first and foremost. But yes, I am from Columbia, South Carolina. I grew up here in the Midlands. I'm originally from New York, Harlem, New York. We moved once my parents were divorced. I moved down here, and I've been here ever since. So my growth and my life experience has been one of the South, has been one rooted in the South in tradition and custom. And that being said, I am a 53-year-old black male that by all practical intents and purposes should not be about to tell you what I'm about to tell you. I am a recently released former inmate of the Federal Bureau of Prisons after having served 15 years on a 20-year sentence. I was released in 2021 under the CARES Act. Thanks to COVID, one of the blessings that did come out of the pandemic was the legal relief that I was able to ascertain while being housed at Terre Haute Medium facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. While there, it became a hot spot. I was able to petition the court due to health concerns, and I was able to be granted an immediate release from a very fair and honorable judge, Judge Curry, here in the District of Columbia, here in South Carolina. She was my...
Hold on. I'm sorry, Scott, because I would just want everyone to kind of catch this the right way, because Scott is like I said, he speaks a whole lot nicer than most of the people I've ever dealt with. This guy is amazingly fluent. His articulation of words, so it might have gotten over a few of us out here, the slow folk like myself. But what Scott's telling you is he had a 30. How long was the sentence?
240 months, 20 years.
So that's 20-year sentence, and you was down at about 14, 13,
Correct.
some change in almost 14
Correct.
years. And COVID hits, and everyone that I know in my circle, we were all tattooed up with freedom flags, and you know how we were all, me and you broke bread. But we were all like anti-COVID. You just said the good thing that came out of COVID, you actually got an opportunity to petition the court to get your sentence, I would say, shortened. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thanks to legislators like yourself, who had the divine wisdom and intuition to put together a bill that directly addressed the medical concerns that were posed by COVID. Understand that that pandemic was something that was uncharted territory. So individuals like myself that were not sentenced to a death sentence, people were dying from COVID. So Congress acted, and President Trump at the time signed the bill into law. And that allowed some relief to be given to individuals that met a very specific criteria. I happen to be one of those individuals that absolutely fit not only the criteria, but I was actually the poster child for what it was to get granted immediate relief by the courts. My 20-year sentence, just so you know, Kevin, was followed by a 10-year supervised release, which is more commonly known as probation. And
Hmm.
since being home within the first 34 months, well, actually, the first 24 to 34 months of being home, I was actually granted an immediate release again from supervised release, again by Judge Curry. So I was able to come out of prison 5 years early. I was able to hit the ground running, put my life back together, and make a positive impact. A positive impact. Again, I have to say it twice on my community, as well as my family and myself. The court took notice of that, and because of that, they allowed me to have my life back. So I've been given my life back. I now have the right to vote again. The only thing that I've not been able to get back, because I have not gotten a pardon from the president of the United States, is my right to bear arms, which is something that I'm certain you and I will discuss.
100%. We're going to get into that in a little bit. And of course, Scott, Joe, just everyone so you know, I met Scott on my journey this past weekend down going to Atlanta, Georgia. We talked about it. The Put Up or Shut Up guys. I don't know if you guys can all see that. That's one of the cards. That's
Yeah.
our guy, Lil Bo, right there. He's promoting his project. I'm a part of that. Scott's a part of Little Bo's life. We connected Friday night, did an interview, and I'm still trying to download that darn. It's a long interview. We should have stopped it a couple times, but it will get out there with yourself. And who are the two other guys? I know
Maine
who there's
and DJ
Maine. That's
Bang
right.
Bang, not where
Yeah.
Cash at.
Yeah, there you go. Some characters right there. Maine was, the serious one of the three. I had a great time meeting with you guys and really having dialogue that was raw. It wasn't like, kind of scripted and all that stuff. And I think you and I hit it off really well because there were some topics that were tough that we didn't agree on, but yet we had that dialogue and that conversation about, the giving back. But let's go back to your upbringing because I think this is interesting. You set this real story for you, Scott. So you're growing up in Columbia. What are you seeing when you're 10 years old? You're coming out your door. You come out the door. What are you seeing in the neighborhood?
Well, let me be real clear. My upbringing and what I saw as a young adult was not that different than most young black adults in my era. I grew up in a town right outside of Columbia, actually the next county over, which is called Sumter, South Carolina. And in my formative years, I, like everyone else, we saw the poverty, we saw the crime, we saw the plight of the Negro family from the 70s into the early 80s. But understand, as a child, I never knew I was poor because everybody that was around me had the same, was under the same circumstances. So nothing looked out of the ordinary. It would not be until I started being able to explore my community beyond the boundaries of my neighborhood. It would not be until that point that I started to realize that, wow, there are other people that actually live better than we do, and they have a lot more than we do. So that's when the early questions of, well, how do I go from the socioeconomic status of where I'm currently housed? How do I raise the standard? How do I raise my station in life? And the clear cut answer to that is education. I applied myself. I've always been a pretty good student, I'd like to think. Uh, but education in my household was a mandate. Graduating from high school was a mandate. It wasn't an option. So education for me was the gateway that allowed a bridge or a path to be actually foreseen and something that would be tangible that I could create for myself. So I went on to graduate in 1988 from Sumter High School. I graduated with both a high school diploma, and at the time, the state also awarded what we called an academic diploma. I have both. I then went on to the University of South Carolina, the Gamecocks, where I pursued a pre-pharmacy career. My curriculum early on was heavy laced with mathematics and science. I've always been an inquisitive child. I've always been an inquisitive minded person. And I was always drawn to math and science because of the finite and because of the definitive nature of something being right or wrong, something being factual or non factual, something being a law or a theory, things that can be proven. So, math or science for me was always intriguing, which is why I followed that particular curriculum. And I was also very, very impressed by one of my early mentors, Dr. Dees, who owned Community Drugstore in Sumter, South Carolina. He was the first and only Black pharmacist in our town. So for me, that had a very profound imagery in my life growing up. And that was something that I wanted to replicate, something that I wanted to duplicate, so that I followed that. From University of South Carolina, I then also attended Francis Marion University in Florence, South Carolina. So that's kind of the nature of my undergraduate career. I did my internship for pharmacy school at the Sumter Cut Rate Drugstore in Sumter, South Carolina. And the thing about that, it was such a magnificent experience. Mac McMullen, he saw a young man and gave me an opportunity. I happened to be not one of, but the first Black male to ever stand behind the pharmacy counter and actually fill prescriptions or help customers with their medication. That was something that I was very, very proud of, and something that I received a lot of accolades from the older community as well as the younger community, looking up and saying, wow, I never would have thought I would see a Black face in Sumter Cut Rate Drugstore. Now, you have to understand, Sumter is a small town, and the mentality is one of many of most small towns in rural America. Um, I was an anomaly. I stood out. But the thing about me as an individual, I never presented myself as a hoodlum, as a thug, or as a gangster. I'm not a gangbanger or any of those things. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't do any drugs. So I've always been kind of the outsider, kind of looking in, and I've always found myself kind of caught between two worlds, where one, you would commonly hear people say, wow, you're very articulate. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you'd hear people say, wow, you sound white. So I'm not Black enough to be Black in some circles, and I'm not white enough to be white in other circles. And that's
Is that so? Let's chop on this. So you spit a lot out, and I'm going to go back to the formidable years in a moment, but because you're putting the whole story out like you should be, you speak so fluent that I'm hearing the story. It's like I'm reading the pages. I'm hearing the story, and you're really amazing at storytelling. But it is interesting because there is that concept, right? That a Black man can't speak intelligently. And that's a concept that we not subscribing to, but that is something you've heard from people. You've talked about that, right? You've heard people say
the
that.
thing about that, Kevin, I think unfortunately here in America, we've been conditioned to believe with sound, right? We've been conditioned to believe with sight. We've been conditioned to believe with the body language that is presented to us. So there's a certain image, there's a certain thought of what a thug is, there's a certain thought of what a hoodlum is. And when those thoughts persist, or when those thoughts are present, there's an innate fear that seems to rise to the surface in people. So now there's a preconceived notation of who you are, and what you're about. But when people hear me speak, there's almost like a disarming effect, because what they're hearing, they're not registering with what they're seeing, or what they believe to be the case prior to getting to know someone like myself. Um, so that's just something that.
Is that racist? Let's because you know what, this is what I kind of can show you coming on. I mean, let's pick that apart. Is that racist? Is that entrenched in our
Well,
fabric of maybe not knowing, the unknowing
I
racism?
think I think you have to answer that in a multitude of ways. The simple answer is yes, but the simple answer is not also the answer that can be applied to everyone universally, or with one broad stroke of a brush, because a lot of people, fundamentally, they've been taught, or they've been conditioned knowingly or unknowingly by parents, siblings, or their culture, even when the intent, express purpose of their upbringing was not to make you a racist. It's just the mindset that permeates, especially here in the South. So, yes, it is a part of our fabric of the society that we live in. But the only way that you're going to combat that, first of all, is it's an ignorant state of mind to begin with. But if you don't now get yourself some knowledge, if you don't present yourself in a way that people can feel comfortable having the uncomfortable conversation, you can never get an understanding because the emotion attaches and the wall is put up because no one wants to be told you're a racist. I don't believe that to be the case. No one wants to be wrong in their assessment of a situation because unfortunately in today's society so many people are very sensitive. You can't even have an honest conversation without fear of retribution or fear of pushback because you stood your ground on what you firmly believe to be the truth. I'm a black man in America of 53 years. No one has to tell me what a situation is or is not. I can discern for myself. I've had enough life experience to know when I'm dealing with someone who's a racist and when I'm in a situation that may have racist overtones. But that doesn't mean that I have to now become belligerent or ignorant and act out in a way that is unprofessionally or unassumingly what a gentleman should be. I'm always going to maintain decorum and I'm always going to present myself in the best manner that I can, even in the face of abject racism. Correct.
So Scott Knight, bottom bunk, did he's got the sentence for 20 years, gets out early on this situation with COVID, and his story now goes from the upbringing was somewhat normal in as you put out there, not somewhat, it was normal in your setting, and you felt as if you really assimilated with the community. But you go from this amazing opportunity, which is a young man in a very economically struggling community, advancing on to college, getting a pharmaceutical degree, getting the first position as a young black man in this setting, and then some stuff started happening around you. And you've been public because you've even spoken to Congress before, and we'll get into that in a moment, folks. But listen, and I want to say this is a little bit of a PSA to anybody out there, because I'm a conservative. Trump, Scott knows me, man. We already had this conversation, so check it out. I don't get offended when I hear things I might not understand or agree with. And that's exactly what Scott just talked on, is you got to be able to have a conversation. Like, for example, you know what? I retort back, okay, you said you had some pushback from, this racial thing from white people. You also said about black people. They have the same, you have some of those similar aspects. Talk about a few of those experiences so the insecure people can feel comfortable.
Well, let me also, before we go any further, let me just wrap this up. It was because the question may be floating amongst your viewers. Well, what did he go to prison for? Because we never said. I was sentenced to 20 years for conspiracy of distribution, possession with intent to distribute cocaine or cocaine base. So, in a nutshell, I have a conspiracy case. I was never caught uh, actually selling drugs or anything of that nature, but I was wrapped up in a conspiracy. But let's be very clear: I was guilty. I want your listeners to really understand and know I was guilty of everything that the government charged. I was guilty of every aspect of what was said about me in court. However, I do not harbor any resentment. I don't harbor any criticism or negativity towards anyone that participated in the investigation, the prosecution, ultimately my trial, and ultimately the sentencing of my case. I harbor no animosity. Okay, let's be clear. I am an American, and I do believe we have the right. We have the right to make a choice. We have to live by laws, and we need laws because laws is what separates us from the chaos in a civilized society. I understand that fact. However, I made a conscious decision while working at the drugstore, at Cut Rate Drugstore. I made a conscious decision to get involved with the drug trade with one of my fraternity brothers, uh, who was a very, very good friend of mine. And I went into it practically thinking this is a business. This is just business. It's nothing more than that. At the time, I did not conceive of the thought this is going to destroy my community or my people. It was purely a financially driven decision to advance myself and my family financially from one station in life to the next. I want to be abundantly clear for that. That was my mindset going into my participation in the conspiracy of selling drugs in South Carolina.
And it's amazing because you go from this, get yourself out of a setting, right? You worked real hard academically. You worked real hard to get yourself into this position where you said earlier with the pride of being the first black man to work behind that counter. And this thing's happening. And then your dude comes along, right? And he's like, hey, man, we got this situation. No matter what, you take ownership for that decision. I heard you say this multiple times.
I have to. And unfortunately for me, what the numbers that we were doing financially in a week, or with, let's just say, within a month, the money that I was potentially making within the first month was the money that I would have made within the first year of working in the pharmacy. The money came so fast and so quickly, and I was so blinded. I was drunken with my own insecurities. I was drunken with my own greed for financial gain that I lost my moral compass. It's as simple as that. I was corrupted by the money very early, very quickly, because it was a very real and tangible scenario for me to be a part of.
Is it crazy sometimes, Scott, when you think about the amount of money that a young man, and we're talking specifically to a black man, so it's okay to stay in this centered, centric place, that the only real options they see are really not going to be education in communities, unfortunately. It's going to be going to the streets. Maybe you get it rich with, some dream of, sports or music or whatever it is. And then it doesn't really cheer up from there, does it? I mean, the real deal, real talk, there's only three options. You're an exception. And look at how that happened. That's kind of mind-boggling. And I think people are going to scratch their head on it.
The thing is, you have to be honest with your situation. And for many of us, it's about what is tangible in the moment. It's you don't have the luxury of an investment with a long-term payoff, right? Because the bills are due now. You're hungry now. You want to change not just your life, but you want to change the lives of the people that are around you. So when you're in a situation of despair, and we're talking about a time when minimum wage was $3.35 an hour. So, how do you live on a wage as such, particularly when there are no employment or economic advancement capabilities in a small town rural America? So your only way out initially is graduate, go off to college, or graduate and go off into the military. But for those that are landlocked in a situation, you have no choices. So people do what they do because when you're hungry, you've got to eat. So you've got to go hunt. And when you allow a baby cub to turn into a wolf, the wolf becomes now the predator, and he's going to go out there and he's going to find what he's looking for. That's just the way it is, and that's something, unfortunately, that is played out in city to city, county to county, state to state throughout America. My story is no different than any number of men universally across America.
What was the reaction? Because you'd worked so hard to get out of the situation, as you say, this aspiring to move forward. And I got to imagine the money you were making as a pharmacist, although you might look back and it was little now, it was probably good for you. Then you're like seeing this potential really positive income business, right?
Let's be clear. In small town rural America, if you're not a working professional, you're going to be a laborer, right? Mm-hmm, and unfortunately, not many laborers actually become rich or even wealthy, right? So unless you have an advanced degree of some such, then you really can't say, okay, well, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to move into middle America. And as black men, that number, when you do the calculus, that number is so small, especially when I was coming up, because even in college, many times I'd be the only black male in my class. So understand there's not a whole bunch of us in Sumter and the small nucleus of black professionals as compared to how many blacks live in the community. It's not on par. So you're talking.
You don't think so? There's an unfair balance still, even in 2023, in your opinion, even back when you were going through your school.
Of course, there's an unbalance in America. 1% of the nation's wealth is housed and owned by one. I mean, excuse me, 1% of the nation's population owns literally 100% of the wealth in America. So when you think about that, even on a grand scale, there's only going to be a small number of people at the top. There's only going to be a small number of people.
But that is fair to say, because it is fair that actually does come down to a multiple racial breakdown, because you don't just have blacks who are offended by that position of wealth, but it's all the other races clumped into that as well, which make up the numbers.
Absolutely. So understand, the moment that I got involved with selling drugs, any thought of a professional career is now out of the window. But you must also understand, at the point in time when I lost my moral compass, I also lost my way from my God-given talents. So education didn't matter at that point because I was making the money. Ultimately, pharmacy was a way out for me, but the drugs gave me the way out immediately. There was a instant gratification, if you will. So now you're able to buy homes, you're able to buy cars, you're able to take care of family, you're able to be traveled, you're now able to live a life. So now all of your collegiate friends and buddies, they're now looking at you like, wow, you've made it. It's almost comparative to being a sports star who gets drafted early on or right out of college. So the degree goes out of the window. So what? Forget about that. Let's talk about this Maserati that I'm about to go buy. So at that point, you enter into the world from the financial side where a degree doesn't even matter anymore, because now it's about economics. If you've got the money, if you've got all the trappings and the semblance of success, then people will embrace you. When you walk into the BMW dealership and you've got the money for the brand new BMW, guess what? The general manager's coming out to shake your hand. You understand what I'm saying? Because those guys that are in there, they're not here to judge who you are. They're there to make a sale so they can get the commission to feed their families. They want a guy like me to come in who's going to come multiple times back to back, or you're going to call me when the latest model of whatever comes out, and I'm coming.
Were you into all the Flash? Did you have a lot of the Flash, Scott, when you were in the game?
Absolutely. I was, man, we had the diamond chains, we had the cars, we had the clothes, we owned the nightclubs, all of the trappings of success. In fact, New Jack City was a movie that came out, and that movie had me in such awe that, when the bag phone came out, I was the first person probably in my city with a bag phone. I was the first person with the Sky Pager. I was the first person with a message writer, the first person with the handheld Motorola. I'm going to class with the Motorola cell phone. And I can remember Dr. Udagu saying to me, Scott, what are you doing with a phone? And the arrogance and the confidence of a misguided young man to even to say to him, I'm getting money, because that's all it was about. That was the American dream for the black man. And unfortunately, I got caught up in that narrative. And once I went down the rabbit hole, there was no coming back. But
let's because finish your thought.
But if I was going to go down the rabbit hole, I was going to go down the rabbit hole and come out the other side of king.
So that's what you saw. You saw the gold, you saw the opportunity, and you pounced on it. But the rabbit hole and the options, right? And so let's talk real talk America, because in our country, we're coming up on a 2024 election. You and I are talking about this a little bit. I believe this country is going to go chaotic again, right? I don't care what side of the argument you want to be on. There's going to be disruptions, and there's all coming to America. You just stand still and get some popcorn and watch. What can we do to get rid of this racially motivated attacking from both sides, every side? And I'm not just talking about, and listen, we could talk about history because it's important. But sometimes when you talk about history, you can't think about the present, and you can't think about the focus on how we fix this.
Right.
How do we fix it? Because all that stuff ain't helping. All the false promises to communities, they're the same. Drug dealing going on, shooting going on. The same problems are going on in communities out in the rural community with heroin. We talked about that. It's more of a white culture, addiction, and we can get into that later. But the reaction from government hasn't changed. I don't care what policies they've done. It's the same game. What do we got to do, Scott?
Well, the first thing that we have to do as a country, and this is just my opinion, right? The first thing that we have to do, we have to have an honest and open conversation with acceptance of the reality that we do live in a racist society. That being said, we have to now, first of all, there needs to be time limits placed on legislators, because if you're not going to have in a democracy the ability for new ideas, fresh, innovative thoughts to manifest themselves in Congress and to be legislated properly and to be received and debated, if you're not going to allow that to happen because you've got people who are entrenched in these positions 15, 20, 30 years deep, you've got to have a democratic process that has turnover of new ideas and minds, which means you have to have new people coming into Congress and or your state and local levels to represent the people. Because once we allow a legislator or a representative or a senator, a mayor, or whomever, to become entrenched, then the values and the concepts of the people, in my opinion, diminish, and the values and the concepts of the placeholder now become more important because I'm going to do my own bidding. When we have individuals who intentionally block legislation, when you have individuals who intentionally block nominations or hold up the ability to have hearings for judges or for whatever the case may be, you're not working the will of the people. Because if you're going to allow government to stall, if you're going to allow government to come to a standstill, then you're just not, to me, you're not doing the will of the people. Because that to me is what's gotten lost in all of this. It seems the politicians come around when it's time for the election, and everybody wants to be hard on crime. Everybody wants to speak on the issues. Everybody wants to be seen at the black mega church. But after the election is had and the person is now elected, you don't hear from them. You don't see them. One of the things that I like to do is just kind of call my representatives or my local people that have been elected to office, because whether I voted for you or not, I'm a constituent still yet. I am a person that you represent because I'm a member of the community. So the thing that gets me is when you call and you can't even talk to these people. It's you're good enough to shake my hand and say you want my vote, but then you won't take my phone call. So we've got to get new people in. But if America,
so we can agree on that. Let's say we can agree on that point. But I want to go back a little bit and listen. We're going to put as much time into honest truth here about conversations. So when you say that we have to come to realize that America is a racist country, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but say it again so I can understand exactly, so we can have a little going back and forth.
We have to understand that from the very fabric that this country was founded on, the very fabric of our Constitution, when it was written and woven into what we have and what we stand on, and throughout the building of this country, it was built on the backs and the blood of the people. The people being black, Indian, or Chinese. It was built on the blood of others. So we can't stand here and say that we don't have a country that does not have racist tendencies and ways. That's just the simple nature.
Is racist though when you say that, Scott? Because it's interesting, because I think the perception is when we say that word, first of all, most people that aren't cool like you and I get really uncomfortable with these conversations. So that's okay.
See, here's the thing. A person being uncomfortable doesn't change the truth from being the truth.
Not at all. And I agree with you. So, right.
It's okay if you're uncomfortable, but you're only uncomfortable because you don't want to deal with it, or you don't want to accept it.
Well, listen, there's no elephants in the room here. We know what's going on over the last 4 or 5, 6 years, and 20 years before that, and 30 years before that, and 200 years before that. We know what the reality is. Yes, there was a beginning in this country where there's no doubt you could argue that during the slavery of this country, during the beginning parts of this country, there are things that we can look back and say, wow, how did this happen?
Well, 2023, we've got to put humanity first.
But I still want to stay on this one, because I can't tell you how much it frustrates me that I watch people first and foremost, exploit this topic to benefit their own
Right.
needs without trying to get to the root of the issue.
Right.
And I see this on both sides, the ones that want to defend and say racism isn't real, and those that want to promote that as part of their business card. I see that being used way too often because I don't hear problem solving going on because, look it, I'm an exception to the rule. We all know that, and we don't have to get into that. But there's not a lot of comfort in the white community, and no one's brave enough to go and say it when they go into communities like you. And no, I've been with you. You know where I go.
Thing, right? You've got to be able to talk to everybody, to anybody,
right
across the table. Despite how you may feel, despite how you may think, right is right and wrong is wrong. It's right is not black and white. Right is right and wrong is wrong. If we start looking at one another as people, if we brought the humanity that we all discuss and say we have to the forefront, if we treated people how you want it to be treated, a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings, I think, would go away. And as it relates to politics, unfortunately, we've got to get the corporate interest out of the pockets of politicians. Just simple. Because as I said to you earlier, how I was corrupted, my moral compass got corrupted by the finances. No different in Washington. It's no.
Is there racism though within certain communities against other communities? So in other words, do you feel that at all the white communities ever are exposed to racism from other communities?
Well, of course they are. Everybody is exposed to racism on some level or not. Now, whether you want to admit it or not, that's a different story. There's racism that goes on within the black community within itself, light skin versus dark skin, affluent versus poor, professional versus laborer. There are so many layers in the total dichotomy of what.
Which is just a normal society, right? That's what you're explaining. It's normal society.
It's everywhere. It's not just I'm black, you're white, so that's what it is. Or I'm a black man and you're a cop, so that means I have to start off defensive and argumentative. No, that's not the case. There are a number of good people in every situation in life, but there's also a number of bad actors in every situation of life. The thing
is, Scott, let me ask you this, because I'm sorry, this is the kind of interview I do. You get me fired up, brother, and I'm going to tell you why. You're right on the edge of talking about exactly what America needs to hear. And what I believe America needs to hear is there a sense? So let's say that we're chilling in the hood. Okay, let's just talk for people's entertainment here. We're chilling, or we're at the club that we were at the other night, and we're just chilling there. And I come in, right, and like, do you think people look at me differently in that environment?
Of course.
That you would feel similar if you went into a white people's environment? You'd feel that way.
Of course. There. First of all, you, sir, are the total sum of your life experiences, right? So whatever your background is, it helped to mold you and shape you into the person you are today. Every thought that you have, every inclination that you feel is a sum total of life experience. So if you walk into a room and you scour the room because you're apprehensive about being in the room, it doesn't mean you're a racist. It may just mean because I'm in a new and unfamiliar environment and I want to get the lay of the land so I know what I'm dealing with. That is understandable. But it's also something that can be misconstrued as, why is he acting like that? Why is he looking around? He must be the police. Who is he? So I can understand both sides. But when questions and thoughts like that persist, that's only because ignorance is there. It's only through real conversation, because once a person meets you and gets to know you, they'll know now they've been disarmed. But them being armed or apprehensive is because of the sum total of their experience with other individuals that may look or sound similar to you or share certain characteristical traits that you may possess or demonstrate. So that's one way that we have to really understand that, because when you and I met, let's be very clear, there was a lot of whispers. Hey, who's the white guy? Why is he here? Is he the police? Is he SLED, which is the acronym for South Carolina Law Enforcement Division? They thought you were an undercover coming in trying to see if there were some liquor violations or something going on.
Excuse me. Yeah, every undercover guy's going to throw the beard on, the dark glasses, come in, try to. No, this is really me. I love it though because I get that a lot. But once it takes 5 minutes, it's all goody, right?
But to your point, we have to have the ability to talk to one another. We've got to have the ability to get to know one another because fundamentally we're all the same and we all want the same things in life. We want to live a healthy, normal, prosperous life for ourselves and our family. And we want to be safe at night. We lock our doors and we have alarm systems as precautions, but it's not because you want to live and say, well, I want somebody to break in my house. That's not what you go to bed at night thinking. You want to be safe and comfortable, and you've taken the necessary precautions. But because you have an alarm system on your house, doesn't mean you put it up because there's a black guy that lives down the street from you. Now,
do you think there's that? And let's ask that question. Do you think when you and I said something similar to it earlier, but do you think when white people see you coming down the street that there's a sense of intimidation or scared?
it depends. It depends on the setting that I'm in. Like when I was in Washington and I'm walking around with the suit and I've got my American flag or whatever lapel pins I'm wearing. No, they don't see me because in Washington you could be almost anybody. So people aren't apprehensive of you. However, if I leave the Capitol and I was to go downtown and I'm in the northeast section of the city or I'm just anywhere other than the Capitol, then of course, because now it becomes, wait a minute, this is a 6'2", almost 300-pound black guy, and because a person has been conditioned to believe that that is the mold of a thug, that is the perception that they may have, depending upon how I'm dressed, where I am, and how I'm presenting myself at that time. I understand that. I've been at the Ritz Carlton and gotten on a hotel elevator and a woman clutch her pocketbook. I know instantly that's only because she's been taught to believe that a black man is going to rape her or steal from her or take something from her. Even in her subconscious, it's embedded somewhere in her for that to be her first instinct. So in those situations, I do try to say good afternoon, hello, how
Mm-hmm.
are you? Because I want that person to then know, even if they don't interact with me, when I leave, I want them to have a sense of calm and saying, oh, wow, I misjudged that guy.
Do,
That's
do, you- do you feel a sense of racism almost every day of your life?
absolute.
You feel, and so let's hold that thought because I want to come back to that. I don't want, I'm getting inspired to get me wound up here on this conversation, and it's intriguing to me because even I think I told you this too. Even as I get the gift that God gave me, and I know what it is, there ain't many people that can walk like me into these types of situations that have comfort level, and this is why you're on my show, right? You ain't going on the podcast, dude. The white dude that calls you up, you can be like, "What? What's it?" We know this, but the point behind it is I want to help fix a problem because although I might be different in opinion on a few things, me and you both have a love for people and we want to fix something. How is America going to, in your opinion, we'll come back to the next, that question I just asked, but just quickly, how do we fix this problem where you get in an elevator and you don't feel like this lady's, and is she actually doing it? Could you misreading it because of what you've been taught to feel about this situation?
That is a fair assessment, right? And we have to assess and reassess and reevaluate on both sides of that. And to the point of whether or not I feel racism every day, let me just say very quickly, I go to a particular Chinese restaurant almost every day and get the same exact order, right? Large wonton soup, extra vegetables, and bourbon chicken.
You're not doing that anymore because I found out about your diet. Cold showers and none of
Yeah,
this MS whatever. You can't eat that anymore.
that's right. So, but when I go in, I'm typically coming. I'm just getting off work. I've just parked my tractor trailer truck. I have on my driving clothes. So I go in, I make my order, I leave. I go in, I make my order, I leave. But on this particular day, I decided to call ahead and place my order, same exact order. So when I came in to pick up the order, the young lady looked at the order when I said, I'm here to pick it up, and I gave her my name. She said, this isn't your order. I said, what do you mean it's not my order? This isn't your order. This is someone else's order. I said, no, it's my order. She could not fathom, because of the way I talk over the telephone, did not register with her that it was actually me. So what she was hearing, she thought, wait a minute, that can't be this big black dude because he doesn't sound like a big black dude on the phone. And I had to tell her, no, it's really me. Matter of fact, here, let me call you. Hello, this is Scott Knight. I'd like to place an order for a large wonton soup with extra. She was like, oh my gosh, it really was you. So in that moment, it was a teachable moment because I knew without her even saying it, you thought I was a white man on the phone because I get that all the time
Mm-hmm.
because I don't sound black.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't call you, hey, let me get this, blah blah blah. It didn't register to her. So it's the subtle things like that we do see and experience every day. But the only way that we can move America forward is when everyone starts putting the best version of themselves forward.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have these, instead of being confrontational, instead of being argumentative, instead of being condescending, try just being a real person and try leading with love, try leading with respect. Now, I don't expect to win everybody over. I don't expect everybody to have a moment where they say, hey man, let me shake your hand and I appreciate you. I get that. But if we don't start having these conversations within ourselves, how do you expect to police the world? And we can't even get along commonly right here together and we're one big family.
I agree with you.
How do
No, I would say to you though that it's these dialogues that are going to change the paces because we've been way too long in our own silos, and when we are in our own silos, we cannot combine the grain that's going to make the best, product that is actually going to be for everyone. I do think the melting of this, let me say this too, Scott, the melting of our country's ethnicity is happening in front of us, and we're seeing mixed races coming together and obviously that is going to change hundreds of years down the road will be a blended race, but right now during this time I want to ask you one more time, do you believe racism is as bad as it was in the 50s and possibly further back in America today?
Okay, me believing something in the 50s or the 60s, first of all, I didn't live to experience that firsthand. So my answer would have to be quantified based on what I've been told and taught. We the construct of America was completely different. The landscape of America was totally different. Now, do I believe black people have struggled from day one in this country? Absolutely. Do I think uh, through the laws of slavery to segregation to the Jim Crow South, none of that was for the advantage or the benefit of the black man. Let's be very clear about that. I was born in 1970, shortly thereafter, the Jim Crow South was supposed to change and the integration of schools started. So I grew up post Jim Crow in the South. So the remnants and the thoughts that were still there, they still persisted. So those thoughts and patterns and ideas and culture was passed on from father to son, from mother to daughter, from grandfather to grandchild. I'm old enough to have lived through and have grown up in an era where all of that stuff still permeated. However, when I look at America today and when I look at the America that my daughter has grown up in, the landscape for her and her life experience is totally different than mine. It has been my goal, and I would hope that it is the goal of all Americans to make America a better place for our children so that when the torch of power and leadership is passed on to the next generation and to the next generation, it will continue to move the social landscape forward and we will become a better and more inclusive society. That being said, again, if we don't start by being honest with each other,
Mm-hmm.
I embrace you as an individual. When I met you through someone, right? Someone that
Mm-hmm.
I respected, someone that I care about. So there was a certain affinity of affection for you that was displayed immediately, simply through introduction.
Likewise,
Being
100%.
that you walked in that door with who you walked in that door with, I immediately extended a hand of friendship to you
Hmm. Hmm.
because there's no need to try to decipher who he is
Well,
because
what would you have done if I came in on my own? I just happened to drive by. I'm in Columbia. I see this really nice
I
van parked out front. I pull in. I want to go and rock and have a good time. How would you have reacted?
I like anyone else in that building would have thought he's a sled agent and or he is a deputy sheriff that is tasked to the governor's task force and he's working here in Columbia undercover because people won't know him and he's coming into the bar to check for any infractions. Because in the business of the nightlife, that is a very realistic scenario that plays out every day all across the state, right? That's reality.
Well, why do you think that they're looking at those places, or why is it that that would be suspected of me going into that? Because you said that before, and I'm kind of wondering. Like, I didn't
Because
see nothing wrong.
unfortunately, when you really get down to the brass tacks, let's be very clear. There's a lot of weed smoking going on in these clubs. There's a lot of cocaine use going on in these clubs. There's a lot of pills. There's a lot of prostitution. There's a lot of underage drinking. There are a lot of things that have to be checked, and if left unchecked, they will grow to become a point of a nuisance.
Yeah.
And in all of these situations, unfortunately, in today's time, again, you have to have checks and balances because unfortunately nefarious activity goes on.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that nefarious activity is going on in each and every establishment. No.
Yeah.
But you have to check because then it becomes a question of if I don't go to your club, but I only go to his club,
Hmm.
it looks like somebody's being profiled. So you
Hmm.
have to go to all the clubs. That's just the nature of the business. But if you don't understand that,
Hmm.
and if you only come from a position of who's that white man, he got to be the police,
Hmm.
but never thinking, here's a man who's just doing his job.
Hmm.
Here's a man who really probably doesn't have any issue with you personally,
Hmm.
but he does take issue with you if you're in here smoking marijuana because it's against the law.
Hmm.
Or if you're in here underage drinking, or if you're in here snorting cocaine in the bathroom.
Hmm.
And these are very real things that occur in the nightlife. Let's
Interesting.
think about that.
Right. And so the perception is, and that was a really good science project that you and I probably are going to be working on because we're going to be blending into different places together and just seeing the reaction from each other. I mean, we went from a club environment till Sunday where we walked into a different place, didn't
Wow.
we?
Wow, absolutely. Journey Church, all praises due to the Most High. I was very humbled by that. I met you on Friday. I spent the day with you at a hunting club in Elgin, South Carolina, which was phenomenal. I'd never been hunting before. And then we went to church on Sunday morning. It was a beautiful weekend. And it was almost like divine intervention because you actually missed your flight. And I was going to ride with you guys to Myrtle Beach to take you back
That's
to
right.
catch
That's
your
right.
flight.
That's
And
right.
we just ended up having more time to bond and get to know one another.
Man, God knows what he's doing. I'm gonna tell you because Scott
Yeah,
knows, and those in my personal life. I was stewing over a lot of stuff, a lot of energy, and I needed to stop. I needed to slow down, and I got to exactly. Thank God I missed my flight.
right.
That's truth
Well,
be told.
but you know what though? That this entire weekend since meeting you, there's been this common thread of universal thought of love, fellowship, and brotherhood. And and I really appreciate and I was humbled by your spirit because I hadn't had any thought I'm gonna go to church. I'm gonna wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and be at church at 9 a.m. That was never on my radar. But that entire weekend since meeting you, I felt like there was a change working through me. There was like an awakening, and I just surrendered to this pulse almost that guided me through the weekend. And everywhere that I ended up, you were there. Everywhere that I ended up, Bo was there, and it was the perfect weekend. It was the perfect way for me. I just felt this calming and a sense of peace that I've not had in quite some time.
100%. And I just want to, to set the tone here. I missed my flight on Saturday. Little Bo and you and I come back, and all big shout out to Little Bo, the put up or shut up, all out hunting, soon to be on a station close to you really soon. This is happening, and we'll talk about that another time. But he hooked us up, and he also knew he was going to bring me to church. And I almost got to tell you, that guy's a sneaky little old country boy. Little Bo might have been sneaking a little bit. He might have did something on purpose here, because I was so upset. You saw me. I was just like, I was almost biting my lip off because I had something personal that was really on me, but not knowing that God has a plan like this, and Bo had a plan. We walked into a place. I want to just let you, and I'm not saying it so you grandize me, but set the setting, because it was unique probably for most people in that room. Would you not say?
In church or
in the church when we went in?
Absolutely. And from the very moment walking into the church, you and I both were received equally. And the vibe and the spirit of what was moving throughout that audience, it was just so invigorating. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I wasn't surprised when you joined the church. I wasn't surprised that the message was received, because it was indeed a profound message, and it was a message that I needed, that I certainly received and was grateful for. And it was just a beautiful experience. I mean, think about it. We stood in the parking lot after church.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was gone, and we were still there.
Mm-hmm. We're just cutting it up, man.
And it did not feel in any way like I needed to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to be exactly where I was, and that was with you and Little Bo. And as you said, big shouts out to Little Bo and the work that he's doing 100%. With the youth in his community. Phenomenal project that they have going on down there. Like I've been on TikTok, just sidebar, all day watching coon hunting and deer hunting TikToks from little kids.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's just amazing. But yeah, just want to throw that out there.
No doubt. And so the beautiful part of, I think, Sunday in church was, we got to go then have a little breakfast and some fellowship and sitting down and just talking. We were talking about different things. And your story, by the way, there's going to be a part 2 and a 3 and a 4 to Scott. And I think the best way to really have you come back on is because you're so good at really getting a thought process way, way better than I am. Like I run into the fire, like I get burnt trying to put a fire out. You kind of see it and you walk in.
But did you notice throughout the weekend, everywhere that we went, everywhere that we went, we either knew someone or someone knew us.
100%. Yes. Yes, sir.
And it was always welcoming. It was positive. Always a blessed feeling. Did you notice that?
100%. Everywhere. I mean, I never feel out of place when I'm down in Columbia in that area. Bo's got me around there. My guy AB Money before, I hung out with him a lot down there. I love the communities, and I love the fact that we're flowing around in multicultural settings together, and we're showing people that this really happens in the real world. And that's the other part of what I don't see enough on the corporate media world. They don't want to show us together. They want to show us divided. Why can't I sit at a round table across from you and have a disagreement on A, B, and C, and then nothing but love on the rest of it? I think it's possible, but they don't want us to. It seems that way to me.
I do hope this wasn't lost on you at Lizard's Thicket when we were standing outside. To your point and to your question of where we are as a society and how do we move past this racist stuff, right? Do you remember the older lady that came out with her?
Sure, I know where you're going. She almost fell. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Before she just stopped, and she had the most pleasant smile and disposition. And here are some older people that you would assume are of a certain mindset. You would assume have a particular thought that she would not even speak to a black man, let alone a white guy with a black man, right? But here's this lady who just stopped, was full of love and full of joy, and was just like, God bless you and have a great morning. And nothing about her was like, oh, I'm fearful or I'm afraid. Like, she just engaged us with love, camaraderie, and respect. That, my friend, is the litmus test. That, my friend, is the measuring rod by which America must be judged. Because if America could be that, in that moment where three strangers, you, myself, and an older white woman, can come together and be at peace with no apprehension, with no tension, with no reservations, with no preconceived ideas, just love and mutual respect, will be the greatest country in the world, my friend.
Scott A. Knight, listen, I'm going to have you back, and we're going to do topics going forward. This is great, just ripping it up. We got an hour in of the first introduction. Scott A. Knight, also bottom bunk, because he spent some time in a bottom bunk. Where can people find you if they want to? Because now you've spoken. We didn't even get into you speaking to Congress, and I do want to have you come back in. This is you got a lot, because your story is going to be in a book, and I'm going to throw it out there to everybody. There'll be a book written, and Scott will have a book coming out soon. I see him as a political activist. I see him in a community working towards the good part of trying to help people. And I also see him and I having times and occasions where we're going to actually help each other with maybe a different version or a different opinion. And that's why this journey is so important. And it's only, I give all praise to God in this journey. And I praise God every day that I got a chance to meet people like yourself, Scott. Thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Scott Knight or Scott A. Knight. We have two pages on Facebook, one for motivational speaking and my personal page. And I'm also on Instagram. And you could also go on YouTube and Google, not Google, but you can search my name on YouTube, and you can pull up all of the speeches that I've given since coming home from prison. And yes, I am the man in the bottom bunk, and the bottom bunk signifies the 13 and a half years that I slept on a bottom bunk, dreaming of the day that I could come home and have a life, dreaming of a day when responsibility fell in my lap, because I've never been the guy that wanted a handout. I've never been a guy that wanted charity. I've never been a guy that wanted the welfare. So even in prison where everything is given to you, I despise the situation because I never wanted anything given to me. So I always wanted to come home, to be the best version of myself, and to create a new life, to rebrand, refocus, and re-energize my community, because that, my friend, is what life is about. There has to be a legacy, and there has to be more than just trinkets of materialism to show for the semblance of your life. I just want to be the best version of the person that I can be, and I want to help wherever I can help. So whether it's in politics, as you say, so be it. If that's what God calls me to do, I'll answer. If it's community activism, if it's just being a good friend, know that I'm here with a strong shoulder to lean on, an attentive ear to listen, and I've got the eyes to see into the soul. I just want to be the best version of me. God bless each and every one of you. Kevin Allen, thank you so much.
Love you, brother. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Bottom bunk right there. He'll be back real soon.